All right, Marcus, let's talk about some of the big stories that happened in the scene this week, starting with arguably the biggest, at least for me personally. Icy Stars have returned with 2 new singles, Anomaly. And Drift. This band was like inevitably going to be dropping new material, right? Like we saw that they got booked for Blue Ridge. They're opening for Bad Omens later this fall. Like we were all sitting and waiting because sooner or later we knew we were getting new material from this band. The question on everybody's mind is like, what exactly would that sound like, right? It's been 6 or 7 years since we got new material from them. A lot has happened in the scene. There's been a lot of shifts in metalcore as a genre. And a lot of the time I felt like Icy Stars was like ahead of the curve in those ways, right?
Absolutely.
So, a big question is kind of like, okay, is this band going to kind of come back sounding sort of like the band we were most familiar with, where we left off with in Treehouse, or are we going to get something like completely new from them, or are they going to settle somewhere in the between and kind of take a little bit about what worked in the past and a little bit about what's working now for a lot of bands? And I think that's where we ended up here, right?
Yeah. And truthfully, I'm not disappointed in that decision.
It seemed like going into this, I had heard a lot of conversation about Icy Stars feeling like they were trend chasing a little bit, which I thought was interesting because once I finally heard a track like Anomaly, which I think a lot of people pointed out early on, falls into that new wave of metalcore that you've seen from like Bad Omens and Kingdom of Giants, where it's very kind of like both flashy and subdued at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like the production value goes a long way towards spicing the song up. And for the most part, it's maybe not the heaviest thing, which ultimately made me kind of listen to Anomaly and think to myself, this is what this band was positioning themselves to release with Treehouse, right? It's just in the last 7 years, the wave passed them before they got there, right?
Yeah. I think anyone who was under the impression Icy Stars would come back light years ahead, I think we're fooling themselves. I think that Icy Stars still have gears, but I think we have to sort of ease back into things after a 7-year, for better or worse, hiatus. You come back, you drop something that's pretty familiar, and I wouldn't rule out this band getting real creative down the line again, but I think you have to just sort of, I don't know, shake the rust off.
For what it's worth,
and I think this is them doing that.
I think Icy Stars kind of, for me, what they prove the most with Anomaly and Drift is that they've been one of the bands who have done better at transitioning outside of the era of metalcore that they came up in, which is partially what they were doing with Treehouse, and I think they're following through with that here. For me, I prefer Anomaly of the 2 singles. I think it sort of falls into the general style of metalcore that I've been really fond of lately. And I think Devin Oliver's voice and delivery is kind of what pushes it over the top for me. And Drift for me feels slightly more experimental. And while I think that it's got the right energy from this band, it doesn't fully stick the landing.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head with both takes.
Drift reminds me a lot of All In from Treehouse, which I think was similar in that, like, it doesn't, it's got, once again, it has the right idea, but doesn't fully stick the landing.
I so disagree because All In is like my
Oh, you're a big fan of that?
off Treehouse.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I think Anomaly's like, respectfully, the clear-cut best song of these two. I'd actually be really interested to talk with someone who thinks that Drift is the better song of the two, because I sort of want to know why. Because my argument for Anomaly being the best track is actually just that it sort of has like we'll talk about them later in the news, but its chorus is so similar to Paris and something you would hear like Lynn Gunn doing. And that's where I sort of especially take joy in listening to Anomaly. It just sounds like sort of a different artist to some degree, while still being inherently an Icy Star song.
I think you're touching on sort of why people maybe pivot to one song or the other. I think there's a certain aspect of people who feel that Drift, in feeling slightly more experimental and not entirely reminiscent of a lot of other bands, is why people feel slightly stronger about it, whereas, you know, Anomaly kind of looks at some of the more popular bands within the last few years and says like, okay, I hear a little bit of this and I hear a little bit of that. And Drift maybe feels slightly more unique than that does.
I think my problem with Drift is that I don't think it's either. I don't know if it's that experimental, and I don't know if it's that unique is my problem with it.
How do you feel about the choice to drop 2 singles at once coming back?
I don't know. It's so there was a time where I really liked the decision to drop like a couple of singles at once. I thought it was new and exciting, and that has since worn way off. And it feels to me every time an artist does it, whether they're very big or very small, you know, in our scene or outside of this scene,
you're almost just taking attention away from one or the other songs.
One track
right?
always tends to get buried. And I think personally, like, oh, maybe I look at a track like Drift myself differently if I'm not sitting there having heard what I think is a better song right beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Does it also feel a little bit to you like this band is coming back unsure of themselves?
It's weird.
Like I'd almost feel more confident about this band if, you know, personally, if they directly aligned with my preference and just said, hey, here's our lead single Anomaly, you know, and we're back.
But it's funny because that's the energy in the chorus of Anomaly. It's just like, I'm one in a million. I'm a fucking anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's very much this band picking up where they left off to some degree from a confidence standpoint. Because, listen, we clocked out of our last Icy Star shift on top of the fucking world. We were that fucking band.
What's fascinating is that, like,
this feels less like a loss of confidence. And again, I think it's more just shaking off the rust. All the guys back in the studio for the first time in 3-4 years. You know, obviously, organically, you got some COVID time baked in there. I think this is more like just getting familiar with what Icy Stars is or are supposed to be again. And again, I think that they have gears. I think it's wise not to start off dropping anything too out there. And maybe it's just because Treehouse is so distant at this point, but when it dropped, it really did feel light years ahead, especially a song like Calm Snow.
In a sense that, like, I didn't even appreciate it at the time.
Yeah, and, you know, part of it was also, like, this is Icy Stars without their screamer, right? Like, this is a whole new taste of this band. But even regardless of that context, it did feel light years ahead, and we're starting where we sort of left off.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that 7 years happened in between, so you've got to kind of battle those expectations at the same time. Holding Absence released their brand new single, False Dawn. And they announced their third studio album, The Noble Art of Self-Destruction, for release on August 25th via Sharp Tone Records. The band had this to say on the new album: after an insanely busy and fulfilling album cycle for our second record, last October we spent a month in Jukasa Studios, Canada to record more new music. This record, the third in a trilogy, is by far our most conceptually rich and expansive body of work to date. I love this idea that bands are now quietly like, this is actually a trilogy. You know what I mean? Because like I swear to God, because this happened with Sleep Token, like literally the other day, where they're like, "Oh yeah, Take Me Back to Eden's the end of a trilogy." I'm like, well, I don't even remember you saying the last album was a sequel, but
you never
if you say
that
so,
first album as one of 3.
Right. Like I feel like we're like rewriting narrative a little bit here, but part of me is also like kind of here for it because it's like, I like this idea that like you marry certain eras of your band together where you're like, okay, this is the 3-album trilogy here. And then like once that's finished, it almost gives us the opportunity to, with whatever our next release is, start over fresh, right?
It also puts your fan base in a funny place where they can't just be like, oh, I loved like the first album era of this certain band. It's just like, no, you liked the era of the original Trinity.
Smart.
And now we're in the second Trinity of albums.
Smart.
And you don't fuck with them as much. But like that first Trinity of albums you dug by virtue of liking the first of that, you know, those 3 albums.
But I also like the idea that maybe you almost come into your third album too and you're like, well, how can I tie it into my first 2 records to almost make elevate those records and make them like new again in a way that they wouldn't be by virtue of the fact that they've been out for years, right? So now it's almost like maybe you hear this record and it provides some sort of context for earlier albums, right? And I felt the same way about Sleep Token, where it's kind of like I hear this third album and it's like, well, now I'm kind of curious to go back and hear the other 2 over again and see like what maybe like thematic or stylistic ties it had that in theory connect all 3 of these albums.
Yeah. And I guess for the record, like I do see, especially like thematically, like a lot of similarities between the first record and the second one.
Mm-hmm.
This third one, I guess onset. I'm seeing less of them initially, but
Okay.
we've only had a taste of 2 songs. Lucas, their vocalist, was on Twitter doing like sort of an AMA.
Yeah, I saw that.
Ask Me Anything, answering a lot of questions. That's when the topic of this suddenly being part 3 of a trilogy came to, you know, discussion, or came to light. There's also discussion about the album being shorter than at least the last one, and Lucas mentioned like intentionally they didn't record any intros or interludes or outros, anything like that.
There were a couple other choice bits in there. Lucas mentioned something about changing his vocal style, being more comfortable, not feeling like he kind of had to hide himself in a certain delivery. And one of the songs in particular being an ode to My Chemical Romance, which makes me especially excited to hear it.
Yeah, I'm super down straight away with this album. I think that this new track is great. The first single was awesome. Scott is, the riffs have been like peak Holding Absence so far on this new record. Those are really standing out straight away. And I also, like always, the visuals, Sam. Aesthetically, this band's the whole package. Emphasis on the aesthetics.
There's some almost like blatant Tumblr-esque screen grabs of this music video that you can pull that are so on the nose that they have to be on purpose. But,
yeah, you have like
but the way they're integrated is so well done.
Cursive overlays over like every single frame of this video already has like a filter applied to it that is, it's like this gold paint splatter, blue hue. It's very much the album. Like it just looks like the artwork for this album in a way. And it ties it all together real nice. And then you've got the other aspects of this where like just the way that this band dresses and presents themselves, and a lot of the shots, like the intimacy of certain shots on here where like you have like the camera pointed like a millimeter away from like the guitar plug, and just certain things like that really just tie together. Like it's almost like the beauty behind the music in a way is how I would describe it.
It's the vision, and it's really exciting.
Holding Absence, poised to follow up album of the year 2021 with another top 10. We'll see if these singles are any indication. Like Hot Start if I'm betting against anyone, it's not Holding Absence.
Just about everybody that we're talking about in the news this week is dropping a new album, and there really has been that little like thing in the back of my head nagging at me where I'm looking at the calendar and I'm like, who's here to challenge Sleep Token right now for me, right? Like who, and Holding Absence is one of those bands, you know, Icy Stars didn't announce an album. In theory, they're one of those bands for me as well, where it's like, okay, these are the potential contenders right now. Like these are the last champions standing who can come out with something that potentially could move Sleep Token from what feels like a position cemented at number one for me currently.
Before the colossal titan emerges from behind the wall that is Bring Me the Horizon and kicks a hole straight through Sleep Token, and Lost is so good, bro. Song of the year.
Lost is very good. Koyo dropped their new single, You're on the List -1. And announced their debut album, Would You Miss It?, which will release September 29th on Pure Noise Records. The album includes features from Glassjaw's Daryl Palumbo, The Movie Life's Vinny Caruana, and Vane FM's Anthony DiDio. And the music video features a acting performance from Frank Iero and a performance and acting performance from the band Regulate. I want to touch on a few things here. One thing is, it's funny to go like Glassjaw's Daryl Palumbo, and in my mind, I'm going Head Automatica's Daryl Palumbo, and then it's like The Movie Life's Vinny Caruana, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I am the Avalanche's Vinny Caruana, and I just need Vane FM's Anthony DiDio to also be in another band so I can reference that in the back of my head. I was hoping you'd be like, and Vane's Anthony. It's like, you do. Those aren't the bands I would have used, right. But if you say so, like, so Koyo is an incredibly exciting new project. Like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be their debut record. Marcos, why is it You're on the List -1 does such a great job of selling excitement for this record? Man, the song is really good. The song's good. There was like an undeniable Taking Back Sunday moment in this, like, that is the second you hear it, it pulls you out of the song in a good way. It's almost like that like it's hitting a certain like trigger in my brain that's just like releasing serotonin that I, used to very specifically get from like those early Taking Back Sunday albums. Yeah, so we're aligned. Like the song is really good, but it's right, honestly the video that pushes this song. The video's incredible into wonderful status. I've said it on the show a million times over, but a band that's funny to me almost like supersedes just being good. There is like no ceiling. You could get away. It helps that this band is also good, but you get away with so much, especially in a music video, when you are actually funny. And Koyo's actually kind of fucking funny. If you're a funny band, the sky is the limit. Sure. Yeah. So this video is very reminiscent of a video we got from the Home Team last year, but almost like a different presentation of the same idea, which has the band performing in like a battle of the bands and like a small diner, by the way. Right. Like, and give you a setting. Frank Iero's one of the judges, right? Though I don't know like what pedigree would have gotten him in there. And then like the cooler version of the same band shows up, right? Vocalist in the fucking NBA tracksuit, like you pointed out. It's insane. It's like immediately looks you're like Suede. Yeah, like they've got the presence that's like they come in and just start like performing the same song, but the judges who like earlier were so bored are losing their fucking minds. Like, holy shit, this is that next wave, y'all. Yeah, all of them gave like a rating, like they held up the actual like number of like, yeah, you guys are just a 3, you're garbage, get off that stage. Mm-hmm. Halfway through the band performing, these other guys walk in, steal their instruments, beat the shit out of them.
start playing this song.
They really he shoves them off the drums. It's so fucking funny.
And to your point, like everyone's just like, they do like the face when of that one TikTok person who like tasted the wine or whatever, and like, oh, this is actually good. Flip their signs over. You know, Frank is written upside up. Not upside down.
Yeah, right, upside up.
Straight upside. The guy who had a 3 turns it upside down. It's a 9 now. It's 6, turned it upside down. That's a 9 now. I don't know. Everyone is suddenly in love with this band. And honestly, it kind of felt that way sitting there watching it too. Because like, not because of the band, not because of Regulate walking in and performing as Koyo, but like just the turn of events in the video. It all sort of makes you appreciate the song so much more. Like you said, a band being funny makes them better. The 1-2 punch of like having a good song with a good video is never lost on me. And suddenly, earlier in the week was not excited about a new Koyo album, but here I am, and I'm there.
Right, yeah,
I'm
like
excited.
now you have my fucking attention. Speaking of bands who have my attention, Static Dress signed to Roadrunner Records this week, and they're going to be dropping a deluxe version of their debut album, Rouge Carpet Disaster Redux, on September 15th. Additional tracks include Courtney Just Relax featuring World of Pleasure, which got a music video this week, directed by Ollie Appleyard, the vocalist. Of Static Dress. Attempt 8 featuring Sophie Myers, De-Sinter Glitter Redux version, and Such a Shame Smoking Lounge Redux version.
We're going to find out it's pronounced Rude Runner.
Oh God, please don't let me mess this up. This album was in our fucking top 20 of the year, and us like repeatedly mispronouncing it is
spelled the same.
So embarrassing. They're not, is what's funny.
They're not.
They're not. Our reading comprehension is just a fucking wasteland.
Static Dress continue to be one of the most exciting young new bands there is out there. We talked earlier.
This band is like a second album away from being my favorite project.
We talked earlier about like Holding Absence being the full package, especially aesthetically. That also applies to Static Dress, who are nothing without Ollie Appleyard's vision as far as the way that this band dresses and presents themselves, and additionally just the filters we put on our music videos, how they're filmed.
It is interesting to look at
one of the most talented creative eyes in this scene at the moment.
It is crazy to look at bands like Static Dress and Holding Absence and think to yourself what a difference it makes to have thought out the entirety of your project further than just the music. Like, it just pays dividends.
Yeah, Sleep Token. We're seeing it in practice right now.
Roadrunner Records is an interesting home for this band. The other bands within this scene signed to Roadrunner, off the top of my head, I believe are Motionless in White, Creeper, and Fever 333. And then I think maybe like Code Orange, who kind of like flirts with being in and out of our scene a little bit. They have such an interesting like alternative roster because it's so small and specific, where it feels like when Roadrunner signs a band, there's like an immense amount of confidence there, and it's like you can kind of get excited about like the weight they're gonna put behind something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you sort of pay attention to what Roadrunner do, and they're not just putting their head out there for any one act.
Right, like I've gotten used to UNFD and Sharp Tone being like, "Hey, we welcomed another great band to the roster," right?
And
but when
a lot of them
Roadrunner
happen to be great,
right? But this piques my interest like almost in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's very curious. Like, what is it
like,
specifically about this band that said like, yeah, we think they're good to be good home?
What do you see that I'm missing? Not that I'm missing anything, I don't think, but like, what is the special appeal behind signing a band like this one versus Void of Vision, right? Like,
and it's also worth noting that like ever since Motionless in White signed to Roadrunner, they have had like an immense increase in popularity. So it's the benefits of what that label can seemingly do for an artist is really promising.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, it feels coincidental, but I remember Chris Motionless is sort of going on record and saying like, yeah, we left Fearless because they weren't doing what we sort of expect Roadrunner to be able to do for us. And here
I think
we are,
that's like,
and I think that came to life.
Right. I feel like that's almost like opening avenues, right? And maybe it's a little bit why the other artists on that roster, like Fever 333, Code Orange, I think have had more success maybe from like a radio rock perspective. And that's where like Motionless in White, I think, has really grown where they hadn't before. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of look at bands like Creeper and Static Dress, and it's like, okay, so if there seems like there's such an opportunity to do the same thing for these artists, which is really exciting. And it's also exciting because I feel like of a lot of the bands that have had success within the radio rock spectrum, it doesn't feel like Fever 333, Motionless in White, Code Orange have had to dismiss the vision of what they want their project to be in order to get there, right? It almost feels like Roadrunner is able to hone the aspects alongside the band that work for them to help get them there. And I'm really excited at the possibility of Static Dress being that. Also, I want to see.
Cool pairing.
I want to see.
Sure.
I want to now see like, okay, Ollie Appleyard. All right, you direct that next Creeper video. Direct that next Motionless video.
Give me that next Motionless video, Chris Motionless. Mm-hmm. If you're out there, hit up Ollie Appleyard in the DMs right now.
Right.
I need.
They got pass him in the. He's gonna pass him in the Roadrunner offices. What are you talking about? He's gonna pass him in the Roadrunner offices. Pvris released their brand new single, "Love Is A." Which Lynn quoted as being inspired by the French phrase "la petite mort," aka the little death. Pvris' fourth album, Evergreen, comes out July 14th on Hopeless Records. And Lynn had this to say on the album: a reclamation of control in our post-pandemic culture, posing a complex discussion of fame, technology, spectacle, and female autonomy. A lot there to take in. All right. I kind of want to start with the album.
And that's what that last quote applies to. The album in full, not this song only in and of itself, and
correct.
Specifically the song.
I'm really excited at the framing of this album because I feel like Pvris is positioning it to be something that's meant to speak to a lot of broad subject matter that is obviously in the current cultural conversation, if not directly affecting a lot of people's lives.
Well, I was going to say, I love the framing of it being post-pandemic culture, not culture during the pandemic or anything like that.
An album that exists in the moment that it's released, right?
Yeah, it exists post-pandemic. To me, that means that, like, sure, some of this stuff might have been written in quarantine or whatever, but it's sort of refreshing to see, because we're still getting songs that were written in quarantine, and we're still seeing lyrics like that, and this feels like a cool sort of cutoff from it all, and I'm excited about that. It's just like everything that was in development during the pandemic is like out, and this feels like the first thing that's like after the pandemic, like breathing it all in and then spitting it back out.
And it also, I think, encourages me to go back and listen to the singles that dropped earlier to pull out the specific context in relation to a statement like this about what the album is going to be that I otherwise probably let go right over my head initially. Now, how do you feel about Love Is A, which also had a kind of like a music video / visualizer released alongside of it?
I've been pretty high on all of the singles leading up to this new album, and that includes Love Is A. Like, I think so far we are 4 for 4 with singles. I don't know if this is my favorite one I've heard, but it does a great job of...
I feel like I blinked and there was 4 singles and this album's coming out.
Where they came. So, I mean,
I know 2 of them came out at like the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was neat about that, for what it's worth, is that there was like a one long music video that like accompanied them, which kind of is like hey, here's something that's tired. Here's a concept that freshens it up, which is kind of like what I had hoped to get from certain bands.
Yeah, definitely. maybe my preferred way after having seen it in action.
Yeah.
Paris definitely presented it in a really good way, a really convincing way. The visualizer for this is fun, or the video is fun, where you have Lynn getting buried alive in a strangely like I watched this and it's such a comforting video.
I think that like that kind of speaks to the subject matter nature of even the title of the song, the love is a, and it's almost like lovingly being buried, you know,
just a little
where
death.
It's almost like, you know,
small little death.
We're like so gently tossing dirt on top of Lynn's lifeless-ish body,
and it's comforting. It's like, let's get to work. Let's get some of this. Let's get more dirt on there. And then the way that this video sort of transitions into Lynn sort of only ever having been half buried alive, but around Lynn, there's like, you suddenly were in a field of flowers. Like everything has grown around us and blossomed, and everything is green, right? Evergreen. And like things are sort of dancing in the wind, and it breathes like a second life into this track, like visually anyway.
I'm excited to revisit the song because I feel like visually we're telling a story, while like poetically within the song we're also probably telling a story that with like 100% of my focus and concentration, I think there would be a lot to sort of chew on here, which once again kind of circles back to the overall like nature of the album. So I think Evergreen is sort of being set up to be something kind of really exciting coming up soon. Spanish Love Songs released their new song Haunted.
But you're not haunted, you just miss everything. You're not a ghost, so stop disappearing. Whoa, whoa.
Announced new album No Joy, out August 25th through Pure Noise Records. This is the follow-up to 2020's Brave Faces Everyone, which was in my top 20 albums of that year. The band had this to say about the new album: "This is the closest we've ever gotten to figuring out how to translate what I hear in my head with more clarity. It's an album about finding happiness in what you have and your current moment. It might be your best moment. It might not be, but you have to find joy in it." Which is interesting to tie that very last line back to the title of the album.
I always love when an artist says out loud, like, this is just sort of the first time that I pictured something in my head, and what came out sounded like what I pictured in my head. It's such a, like, that is one of my favorite windows into the artist that we don't get super frequently. So
the creative process.
Like I appreciate it so much, because you can reflect on the past material and be like, well, like it really challenges you to kind of see what they meant by that, right? Like, or rather, like you sit there and you're listening, you're like, I wonder how off this is from what we wanted it to sound like, and things like that, right?
There's an absolutely beautiful music video that's been released alongside of this as well.
About damn time, by the way. Like, holy shit, Spanish Love Songs.
Oh, you've been waiting.
Yeah.
So this band's releasing a lot of covers soon, which kind of like I've heard a couple I liked and a couple that just sort of bounced off of me, right? Which is the nature of most covers I listen to at this point. But like in reality, what I was really waiting for was like the next release to follow up Brave Faces. And now that we're here, and to have like such a strong lead single. So talking about that music video, so the band's performing at like kind of like a honky tonk type bar, right? A little bit of what do they call it? Square dancing.
We're doing a little bit of that.
When like our quintessential, alternatively dressed, almost goth influenced, out of place main character shows up.
We straight up look like a Destiny character when
we
we're
do a little bit
introduced.
look like a Destiny character. Like it's a little bit of like Motionless in White, Cyberhex era type beat.
Well, I was gonna say, like, based on that and like some of the choice shots in, like, there are moments where this person is learning how to smoke a cigarette or drink a beer for the
You're
first
right.
time.
It's very specific that they're alien in like comparison to everybody else here.
And
right?
I don't know if that's like, oh well.
And then, but like and then the people there are kind of like accepting, right?
It could be like a storytelling thing where it's like,
very much a storytelling thing. I assure
right?
you,
like social anxiety and like, hey, it's not all
That's
that
a good
bad.
point.
Like, go out there and just be yourself and whatever. And then by the end of this video, like that alien person is acting very human, and they seem very comfortable, and everyone's very accepting of them. There's definitely something there, right? Storytelling wise. So I don't think it's just this random like alt person who's like gothic or whatever. Like I feel like it's very intentionally like an alien type being. I don't know.
And Spanish love songs are one of those bands where I think like it's layers of cleverness. So if you sit there and like really drink it in, you'll pull all that stuff out. And I'm looking forward to doing that in the future.
Also, fucking insane line on here about another dead body found at the local McDonald's. I'm paraphrasing.
Police
a little
standing
bit,
around
but, like,
doing nothing.
whew.
There were a lot of choice lines in there, but again, like there are certain bands in this scene that I think you can rely on to deliver a certain level of writing that is just so far above average that it kind of makes everybody else look significantly below average by comparison. Marcos, last news story this week: Riley dropped new single "LA Fucked You Up" featuring Platinum.
You don't know what you've been missing, but somehow you like it. I don't know why you keep tripping, you're so indecisive. Going back for the West Coast, you've been outside.
Riley's new EP Changes comes out June 30th on Thriller Records, and Riley had this to say on the new track. I did LA Fucked You Up because being born and raised in Southern California, I noticed how many people would flood into LA in hopes to fulfill all their dreams. More often than not, though, LA would tear them apart. This city isn't for the faint of heart, and it'll eat you alive if you let it.
It's sort of starting to become a theme in Riley's
Riley's got
music.
bars, even when he describes his songs, which is crazy.
This also isn't the first time we've sort of tackled that subject matter to some degree.
It almost feels like the core of everything that's come from Riley recently.
And I love
like
it.
Los Angeles feels like it is like Riley is like some sort of like
This is a continuation
character
of
that is Los Angeles, and like you filter that experience through them.
I love that. Yeah.
But you kind of mentioned something when we were checking the song out earlier where you feel like this is Riley almost like circling back to exactly the style of delivery that like so enamored us with him to begin with. And also how this is kind of like it's weirdly become sort of like a less free, like it felt like we had a certain deluge of artists that like we could go to get this certain style from, and it feels like they've all sort of like splintered off in a million directions. So suddenly when Riley kind of like runs it back like this, it feels incredibly refreshing.
I mean, it helps that we're not just running this back, but it's so finely tuned at the moment that Riley just straight up sounds better than ever.
Mm-hmm.
This is like this and Pink Linen, which I believe was the first single off of here, but it might not make the cut.
No,
I think that's I believe that.
I think, is it only a 4-track EP?
I believe so.
Holy fucking shit! It's
So,
not enough. It's not enough.
Pink Linen came out recently as well. And what I hear when I listen to those two songs specifically, as much as I like the last project, the one before that, Riley's just in their fucking bag.
Mm-hmm.
In
I'm
a
100%
big
with
way.
you. And I think pulling Platinum in for this was a fantastic choice as well, because Platinum is one of these artists who I feel like I'm currently at a stage where I can't get enough of them.
Well, it's also a very unfamiliar Platinum featured here on this track. Like, this is Platinum with like a massive fuck ton of effects applied to the vocals and a lot of character. Like, Platinum definitely has character and like their charisma, whatever. But like, this might be for all the Platinum songs I like, this might be my favorite version of Platinum that I've heard yet.
two specific things about Platinum I really enjoy from this song in particular. The first one is rhyming NBA with NDA, which I think is really hysterical. And the second thing is watching this music video, Platinum doesn't show up, but during Platinum's verse, Riley's there like vibing to it the whole time.
Riley
very
takes,
similar like that MGK video with Lil Wayne.
Riley's essentially like taking a breather for like this 30-second feature, but occasionally will like pipe up and mouth the words and just like sit there and do like
right?
Some motion.
Act him out a little bit.
Right. Right. Like NDA, and he's just suddenly like
right.
ghost writing.
Which I think is a fun approach to not being able to maybe get the ideal, which is having the artist in the video alongside of you. So yeah, all in all,
we'll never stop singing Riley's praises, especially because Riley has never given me a reason not to. We're only getting better. Love the Thriller Records signing here. Eager to hear the rest of the CP, the rest of the songs we haven't heard off of it. Only good things from Riley lately.
Agreed.